I want to start with a quick refresh of today's gospel. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "She, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." Okay, so on the whole, this is not a money homily. It's a homily about faith, but it's not as if the literal aspect of the financial giving to the house of God does not apply. So let's take just a moment here at the beginning to own the most obvious takeaway from the gospel before moving on to the more subtle points. The widow gives 100%. And I think that should afflict our conscience if we complain that the basic expectation of giving 10% is too much. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many Catholics who are very generous, but there also remains a strong undercurrent of thinking that it is somehow indecent to talk about money or fundraising. We often have a kind of a mentality that we will give from whatever we have left over after we buy our cars and our houses and our new TVs and our phones, and we think that while we sit in churches built by people who were much poorer than us, who sacrificed much more than us. Again, this is not a money homily, but let me give you this quick math. If you make, for example, $50,000 per year, giving 10% of your income would mean about $83 in the collection plate every Sunday and solemnity, or about 60 times per year that you would see the collection basket. But like I said, this is not a money homily because cheerful financial giving is but a natural side effect of a life lived for God. If we love God, giving is easy. The widow in the gospel gave freely of everything she had financially because she had already given everything she had, her very self, to God spiritually. If we were to ask her, "How were you able to make such an incredible sacrifice?" she would be confused as to why we were impressed. Perhaps she would reply, "Well, God has given me everything and I trust Him completely. This is just a little bit that I could do to honor Him in His temple. I would have given more if I had it, but I can never repay all that God has done for me." Does this mean that every Christian is expected to empty their bank account to prove that they love God? No. Giving is not a substitute for faith, but rather a natural response to it, in the same vein as loving our neighbor, forgiving our enemies, visiting the sick, etc. These things are not substitute for loving God, but a natural outflow of that love. Some may visit the sick out of base responsibility, but without love of God. Someone has to visit Aunt Betty in the nursing home, so I guess I'll do it this week. But someone who loves God will naturally look forward to finding those who need someone to visit them. Someone may forgive their coworker because their boss told them they had to, but someone who loves God will look for occasions to offer mercy even when it is not demanded. Some may do charity work not because they love God, but because they are required to for school or to keep their scholarship. They may work at a food pantry more to get the emotional high or to be able to post about it on social media. But someone who deeply loves God will always be on the lookout for someone who needs help because they recognize the face of Christ in the other. Any goodness they feel because of the recognition they receive from it is purely secondary. Someone may be financially generous for tax purposes or because they feel guilty about something else, but without love of God. People who don't come to church will sometimes buy my meal at a restaurant as if that covered their religious obligation. "Oh, I got your lunch, Father, so I'm good to go now, right? Hey, thanks for the free food, man, but you still need to come to Mass and come to confession." But someone who loves God will be joyful to turn out their pockets when there is a need, because they recognize that they cannot outdo God in generosity, and that He will make sure they always have enough. Again, this is not a money homily. Financial generosity is important, but it is only one aspect of an authentic Christian life. And our relationship with God, and even then, it's only an indicator of something deeper and more profound. Look at the widow in Zarephath from the first reading. She, like the widow in the gospel, has basically nothing but the tiniest bit left. She is going to gather firewood to cook one last meal before her and her son starve to death. And yet, at the insistence of the man of God, at the prophet, she gives it. And what happens? she has more than enough. And really pay attention. It's not just like more than enough, like she went from having enough food for one meal to having enough for 2 or 3 meals. She went from having literally only enough food for one last meal, 1/3 of one day of food left. She went from having that to having enough to feed 3 people for an entire year. Again, quick math. She had only enough food for 2 people to have one last meal, 2 servings. But because she gave generously, even though it seemed like she would then be completely out of food, instead, there was enough for 3 people to eat every day for 365 days. She went from having 2 servings of food left to being able to provide 3,285 servings. That means, quick math, that God multiplied her gift over 164,000%. God multiplied her gift because she was faithful 164,000%. We cannot outdo God in generosity. And remember, this is not primarily about material or financial means, even though it does apply to that too. If you make a sacrifice to visit the sick or the imprisoned for love of God, when you find yourself sick or imprisoned, God will surely provide others to come and be generous to you with their time. If you are quick to make the sacrifice to forgive others and not hold grudges, then when it is your turn to need to be forgiven, as we all need to because we are all sinners, if we are quick to forgive, then others will be quick to forgive us. If we pray for others out of love of God, others will pray for us. If we are merciful out of love for God, then others will be merciful to us. If we are patient with others for love of God, then others will be patient with us. And yes, if we are generous for love of God, then God will be generous to us in return. How does this work? Because Christ has already paid the ultimate price for us. He gave himself to God on the cross for us, a gift of infinite value. This is what the letter to the Hebrews, the second reading today, is referring to. All the benefits that we have as Christians, all things that we enjoy, this divine multiplication being just one of them, we receive these benefits not because of any objective merit of our own, but because of our relationship with God, whom we love, and he loves us. The widow in the gospel is not about the collection plate, but it certainly is not only about that, not even mostly about that. It is mostly about the confidence and trust of giving ourselves completely to the love of God and understanding that he cannot be outdone in generosity or in love. In whatever ways he has asked us to be generous in life, if we trust in that, he will do even more. If someone needs your time, give it for love of God. If you do so, you will find that there is somehow still enough time to get everything done. Just yesterday, as I was preparing this homily, there were 2 people that needed my time in a way that was not part of my usual Saturday afternoon schedule. And it was tempting to say, no, I'm too busy. But I gave time out of love, and guess what? There somehow was still plenty of time left to finish this homily and get ready for Mass. If you are asked to be generous financially, if you do so in the love of God, he will be even more generous to you. You will get an unexpected raise, or your long-lost uncle will remember that you gave him $10 in 1996 and decide, you know what, I'm going to pay you back $10,000. I'm serious. Stuff like that is just going to happen if you are generous. Now, just in case it needs to be said, God does his divine care through other people, not through things like the casino, just to be clear. If you put extra money in the collection plate today or this weekend or next weekend, do not expect God to bless you via slot machines or sports betting winnings. In fact, I think it's a lot better if you just don't do that at all. There's better ways you can spend your time and money. If we are generous, God will take care of us. One of the students who went on my pilgrimage last year texted me again while I was writing this homily that they'd love to come again this next year to Ireland, but don't have the money. I said to them exactly what I'm saying here because I truly believe it. I advise them to be generous according to their state in life, and God will take care of it. If we are generous, God will be even more generous. If you're called to be generous to a spouse in marriage, because marriage requires sacrifice and giving, if you do so in love, God will bless your relationship and take care of you. Many end up stuck in sort of long-term dating because they are afraid of the future. They lack trust. If you give yourselves abundantly to each other in a holy and virtuous way, in the love of God, he will care for you. If you are asked to be generous as a parent, raising children is difficult and tiring work, but if you do so in the love of God, God will care for you with even more love than you give to your children. Some avoid having children because they are afraid they will not be able to do it, that it will impede their happiness. But no, if you give your parenting generously to God, He will give you abundant joys and graces in return. In fact, we would probably do well to talk more openly about the true joys of parenthood and the many ways that God returns the blessings of parental sacrifice. Young people, listen to this one especially. If you are asked to be generous by giving your life as a priest or a religious brother or sister, and joyfully do so out of love for God, God will be so incredibly generous in return and pour great abundances out upon your life. It's a beautiful experience. Parents, trust, please. If your child has a religious vocation, God will bless them more than you can possibly imagine. I know you worry that they will be lonely or unhappy, but please trust. If your son or daughter joyfully gives themselves to God's plan, they will be so blessed. I constantly laugh with amazement at the blessings that I get to receive as a priest, more than I could ever have imagined. I could spend hours sharing how that has been true in my own life and the lives of other priests and religious that I know. Truly, our God is a God of generosity, love, and mercy. We cannot outdo Him. Whatever we give, He will give more than abundantly in return, be it financially, be it in time and sacrifice, be it vocationally, anything. Whenever we trust God and give ourselves to Him, He will see that we always have enough time and more. We have enough of everything that we need. The jar of flour will not go empty, the jug of oil will not run dry. All Christians have a responsibility to share the gospel. Please share this with others, the others who need to hear it.